welcome to our virtual gathering presented by the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance. We are the statewide membership-based historic preservation organization. My name is Beverly Thomas, and on behalf of the Preservation Alliance, I'm pleased to welcome you to Real Estate Insurance and Financing Strategies for Older Homes with David Deysher, Evelyn Welton, and Mike Bertolone. Today's program is part of our Old House and Barn Expo on the Road series we launched in March as our COVID-safe replacement of our postponed 2020 Expo. We'll continue to offer these virtual sessions throughout the year and have started some in-person events as well. We were experiencing some technical difficulties, so hopefully everybody can hear. If you're having problems, please maybe put something in the chat or let us know somehow. We always enjoy getting you and other historic property owners and stewards together to share practical information from highly qualified presenters, making connections, and offer you a dose of energy and inspiration too. I know many of you have joined us with past Expo on the Road sessions, but for those who have not, I'd like to mention a few housekeeping points before we get started. I ask you to please stay muted to help keep the background noise down during the presentation. You may also want to spotlight the speaker to control using the side-by-side control option, so you only see the speaker. And also, if you could turn your video cameras off to keep the internet connection as strong as possible. Today's presentation will run about 45 minutes and will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A. I'll wrap up the program at 1 o'clock, but our speakers have agreed to stay on for an additional 15 minutes of Q&A if you have additional questions. And before we close, we'll select a lucky winner of today's Expo door prize. So now I'm pleased to introduce our speakers. David Deysher has over 24 years experience as a realtor specializing in antique and historic homes. After an extensive search to purchase his own antique home in 1996, he took his acquired knowledge and passion for antique homes and started a career in real estate. Ultimately, David started Historic and Distinctive Properties of New England, the only full-service real estate company servicing this unique market segment. 2 years ago, he merged the company into a local Coldwell Banker office, but remains heavily focused on the antique market, working with both buyers and sellers with this specialty market. Evelyn Welton, retail lending sales manager of from the Bank of New Hampshire, has 34 years of banking experience, with the majority of those years spent in mortgage lending. During her career, Evelyn has worked primarily for community banks focused on New Hampshire market and the unique properties found throughout. Mike Bertolone, insurance agent for American National Insurance, has over 30 years of experience providing clients top-level service with their insurance needs. His specialties include rural homes and agricultural risks. Mike has a keen interest in protecting what many of his clients value most: historic homes, furnishings, and outbuildings. So at this time, I am pleased to turn it over to David Deysher. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Beverly. Thank you for the welcome message. You make it sound like I know what I'm talking about, but we'll give it our best. I'm going to today talk about the unique real estate market of antique homes. With the 4 bullets that are up there will be sort of like the subtitles that we're going to talk about. And we'll cover each of those sort of briefly. And as Beverly said, save your questions for the end. But we're going to take a look at today's antique home market. And then we'll take a look at some of the things that have been happening traditionally in the past. And we're going to take a look at what's happening now and going forward, because it's a very dynamic, exciting market that we're in right now. And then we're going to switch it over to, I don't know how many of you that are on the call are considering selling your home, or how many of you are considering buying an antique. But we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things you should be looking at doing if you're in either one of those positions. Okay, Evelyn, you can move it on. Thank you. So what's the market that I'm talking about here? And it's really something that was arbitrarily set at anything built prior to 1920. And the reason for it is before 1920, there wasn't really anything like tract housing. Sears Roebuck hadn't started selling, you know, home models and build it yourself kind of things until the mid-20s. And so it was really sort of like standalone properties that had made up the market. And this market historically, hold on just a second here. This market historically represents about 10% of the New Hampshire multi-list service. If you take out the numerous in Nashua, Manchester, any of the larger towns and cities, the triple deckers and the urban dwellings that were all built probably in the late 1800s, the market that really serves the individual residential home market is more like 5%. So what does that translate into numbers? Well, normally the real estate market in New Hampshire has about 21,000 homes on MLS. So you'd have typically about 2,100 that were built prior to 1920 and probably about 1,100 that were built that were in that 5% of the true single family residential housing. So the next number is sort of interesting because I said typically. Today, I took this number about 3 weeks ago. There are 760 properties, or 11.8% of the MLS, that fall into that pre-1920 category. So it sort of confirms what's being stated all around the real estate world. We have an inventory shortage, and a lot of this has fed the feeding frenzy that's been going on in the real estate market for the past year. And of those properties, over half of them, or roughly half of them, 40% of them, are priced over $400,000. So this basically tells you that the antique market tends to be in the higher end, which, you know, if you're thinking about selling, that's a nice thing to know. And year to date, there have been 760 homes sold over 400,000. So, you know, the market has been actively selling the homes in a very good price range. Okay, some of the market factors that have existed. When I sit down and talk to somebody about listing a home, the first thing I try to tell them is that, you know, get used to it. You're going to have a longer selling cycle because we have a very specific niche market, and don't expect to have this thing sold in a week or 2 weeks or a month. Yeah, you can have 3 to 6 months until you get your house under contract, and that's just to try to set the bar at a realistic level of expectations. So, funny thing about it is that today that is totally wrong. Everything that's been going on since I've been in this business is really not valid in today's market. I mean, the selling cycle is totally compressed, with many homes getting offers within days or weeks, not months. I've been amazed at some of the houses that I've been involved with that I thought would, and I've told the owners, listen, we're going to be in this for the long run. But it's crazy. It's been an exciting market. The other thing that's happened is that the median pricing has literally gone through the roof. We've seen increases of 15 to 20% in the last 12 months, and it basically shows little signs of abatement. So all those things are just real positive things for if you're thinking about selling. You probably should be saying, why not now? And it's a very valid question to ask yourself. The thing that's been happening over the past 2 months is that there has been growing inventory. And so the market is sort of stable. It's come down a little bit as far as the feeding frenzy. And there are also rumblings that the interest rates are going to start inching up over the next 6 months. In a recent report that came out from the New Hampshire Association of Realtors, I'm sorry to bore you with the statistics, but it sort of brings a lot of reality to this, is that we've had a slower July, August in the market. September started picking up, and they are predicting that October and probably through the end of the fall, winter months of 2021, or 2021, that the market is going to resume a very aggressive track. And then who knows what's going to happen in 2022 if the interest rates go up. So the bottom line is it's a fantastic time to sell. I mean, if you're even thinking about selling next year or the year after, really think about at this time being an ideal time. And I've had this happen a couple of times this year where I've had buyers interested in a home that I listed, and they sort of backed off and said, well, we're really not ready. We're going to wait a couple of years, and sat down and went through the numbers with them, and boom, they decided, yeah, this was the right time. And neither one of them regretted it. I mean, one house that I recently sold, and I'll show you that in one of the upcoming slides, came on and sold in 2 days at 50,000 over asking price. So here you are. You're going to sell your house. What are the things that you should consider when you're doing this? The first thing is, and that's not to blow my own horn or anything like this, but you really need to take a look at the realtor that you choose to work with. Make sure that person understands old homes, because trust me, it's a different tool. It's a different market than the normal market, and that realtor has to understand the product, because bottom line is a lot of realtors don't understand they're in a sales job, and this is a sales job. So how do you sell well? You know your product. So when you're talking to realtors, ask the hard questions. What do they know about old homes? What's their experience? So that's probably the key criteria when you're looking at selecting a realtor. As the owner, you should have a detailed history of what you've done, because people, when they're coming through, are going to have a very strong interest in what's been done, what's going to need to be done, what are the hidden things that I might be looking at if I buy this bottomless pit, as so many people describe old homes to be, which I totally disagree with. So if you have the history of what's been done, that makes that a lot easier pill to swallow for the potential buyer. Be prepared to make some practical changes, but not necessarily expensive. Most importantly, make sure that they're neutral. Do some updating. I don't recommend huge financial upgrades, but if you could do, let's say, if you have a kitchen that's got 40-year-old, Formica countertops, and you can put in some granite for a couple of grand, and it just makes a night and day difference between what it looked like and what it looks like now. Consider doing that kind of stuff. Most importantly, declutter. Clean up the property. Make sure it's as appealing as possible to the potential buyers. Because one of the things that has been used an awful lot in selling a home today are the use of open houses. And so you're going to have a lot of people coming through, and so you want to make sure that the house looks its best. One of the side services that Coldwell Banker offers is a program called Revitalize, and they'll actually come in and work with the sellers to help declutter, help to do some renovations, some minor renovations, clean up the property, get rid of junk, and all these expenses that you don't want to necessarily put out for when you're trying to sell your house can be deferred until closing. So it's a really neat service to look into. So that should be something to consider when you're looking at choosing a realtor as well. And then this is something I tend to tell people is that, if you've been in your home for 20 years or 30 years, and I can share this with experience, because I just sold a house that I lived in for 23 years. And you sort of have to swallow your pride. I mean, the sweat equity and the love and the passion and all the stuff that you've done to your house in the period you've been there. But trust me, the new stewards, and I really refer to buyers of an antique home as not being owners, but stewards, they're going to come in and want to change things. And I mean, I can see that in the house that I sold. I'm afraid to drive by it anymore because of the way it's being changed, but you just sort of have to accept the fact that that's going to happen. and not to get that, carried away when you're looking at buyers, looking at your property and say they want to do this, they want to do that. Just swallow your pride and say, whatever, it's our stewardship is over. And then the final point on the selling side is, again, patience. Make sure that if you choose a realtor, let them do their thing. Let them do what they do best. I've seen so many times over the years that I've been in this business that somebody lists an antique property, doesn't sell for 3 months, doesn't sell for 6 months, and it's the easiest thing to do is to blame the realtor. If you make the selection on the front end and have yourself a defined marketing program, let that realtor do their thing, and just don't go arbitrarily out and go through 3 or 4 realtors, because it really doesn't do anything to help you sell the house. In many cases, what's going to help sell the house is the internet presence, because that's what sells houses today, and the dedication and the commitment of your realtor and the communication. So that sort of completes the selling side. A couple of just closing points on that topic is that one of the things that you might want to consider today is doing a pre-inspection, so that you have a list of what the house was like, what it needs, what it doesn't need, or you might even address some of these things to make the house more appealing. And then also try to set a realistic price and work with your realtor in doing that. I had a recent example of someone that said to me, well, how do I set a price to avoid a bidding war? I said, well, that's easy. You just set the price unrealistically high. Well, that's not the point. You want to set something that's realistic. And one of the things that most realtors will provide, and I'm offering that to you today, anybody that's attending this, if you want to have a free market analysis, I'd be glad to come out and give you a market analysis to give you an idea of what your value might be in this market. These are 3 houses that have sold in the last 10, 12 months. The top left is a 1740 home in Amherst that sold last November, before the market really got crazy for antiques. The feeding frenzy in the market sort of lasted ahead of the it was the traditional homes, more contemporary homes, before the antique market got pulled into this whole craziness. So this was a house that went to the more typical selling cycle, and it was on the market for 3 months, and it sold for right at the asking price in the high 300s. The top right is a home right in the village of Amherst, and this was a home that the seller felt that she wanted to sell for about $795, and I did my market analysis and came up with a value of $895, and it sold for $925 in 1 day. So that's a little bit of what can happen in this marketplace. And then the bottom one is a beautiful Victorian in Milford, and this is the home of the couple I referred to earlier, where they were reluctant to buy a home that I had up in Alexandria, and said, we want this home, but we're going to be working for 2 more years. And I sat down and I went through similar type of discussion that we're having now, and they decided, well, let's go for it. So they bought the home in Fremont or Alexandria, and we put the house in the market in Milford, and it had 4 offers in 3 days, all of them over asking price, and it actually ended up selling at $533,000 on a $479,000 asking price. So that's a perfect example of what's going on in this marketplace today. So that's the selling side. So let's take a look at the buying side.
David, I'm sorry, I'm late on the 5-minute warning.
Where am I? 2 minutes?
Yeah.
All right, I'll get through it. So from the buying side, again, do your homework, research the various periods that interest you. For example, if you're a guy who's 6'4", you don't want to be looking at a cape that's got 6 foot ceilings. So do a little bit of homework before you start working with it. Work with a buyer who understands old homes, because there's a lot of nuances that a lot of realtors don't understand. A buyer who understands old homes to point these things out to you. And then an inspector, that's your job as the buyer. You gotta hire the inspector. Your realtor can help you, And what you want to do is interview that inspector before you hire them to make sure they understand antiques. Because one of the worst things that an inspector will do for you, he will start ramping and raving, talking subjectively rather than objectively. You want to know what's right or wrong with the property, and make sure you got an inspector who knows that. And then also when you're budgeting what you can afford to pay, figure in what it is that you want to do, what you want to restore, what you want to update, so you're not getting yourself into being house poor after you do it. And then just in closing, to get me back on schedule, find an insurance company and a financial institution that understand what you need when you're owning an antique home, when you're trying to buy an antique home. And that's why Beverly so astutely put this team together. So I will turn that over, Bev. And we lost Bev.
Here I am. All right,
Yeah.
we're going right into Evelyn.
Okay, I'm just moving forward. Okay. So areas of consideration, make sure you know your goals. Thank you, David, because you actually took us through part of this.
Evelyn, excuse me, can you turn your camera on? Is that possible? Or are you worried about internet?
Well, it is on, but I think because I'm sharing my screen, let me just try. Hang
No,
on.
that's okay. If
Got
no,
it.
that's all right, Evelyn.
Oh, wait a minute. My apologies. Start video was off. Okay. And back to screen share. Okay, sorry about that. So basic preservation with modern upgrades. Are you looking to do some rehabilitation, just real basic, or do you want an authentic restoration? How much money do you want to spend is what this all comes down to. So think about your financial abilities and your time availabilities. Is it general maintenance, making sure the foundation doesn't leak and the roof is good and things that we all go through? Or is it ongoing preservation and this is really a labor of love and you want to slowly work on it? And then you have to consider the lender's perspective. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes. So every loan type out there is available for an antique home. You can use rural development, FHA, VA, the secondary market that you hear about on the news every day, or you may use portfolio loans that are loans generally held by the lender. There's no question that rural development, FHA, those government type loans and the secondary market are going to be, what's the word I want to use? A little more arduous to get through the process. They have a lot of condition requirements with these programs. It can be done, but please remember there are a lot of condition requirements. The property has to be marketable. And by marketable, I mean, how many other homes similar to that have sold in the neighborhood in the last 6 to 12 months? That's how marketability is determined. And then may the home inspection share some valid condition issues? It's possible. David was kind enough to mention the importance of a home inspection. And I'm going to say out loud, don't ever share your home inspection directly with the lender. It is your home inspection. You would be paying for it. And the only time a lender needs to see a home inspection is to deal with whatever the particular issue is that is raising concerns. And so a quick example would be the appraiser says that the roof appears to be at its end of life, yet they didn't climb on the roof. So do they really have the authority to say that? You have a home inspection where the home inspector said the roof is in great shape and has at least 5 years left. I only want that one page from the home inspection or a separate letter from a home inspector addressing only that issue. And so those are little tricks of the trade that I can share with you today. As David mentioned, a home inspector's job is to point out to the buyer anything they may need to work on. That could be the smallest spackling of a crack in a wall. And that just doesn't make a home less marketable. So it's really important to you keep the inspection, we'll get the appraisal, and then work with your lender, your loan officer in particular, and your real estate agent to determine what actually needs to come to the bank. Okay, so when we talk about marketability, you might think, wow, antique homes, there's not going to be a huge, set of marketable comparisons out there. And I just threw these three onto the slide deck because we recently, in the last 12 months, we financed all three of these homes. All three of them were marketable, quote unquote. And the comparables that we used to validate that, as you can see, the top left one, it was a 164-year-old colonial. The comparables were between 120 and 320 years old. I would say that tells me that antique homes are very marketable. If they weren't, we would not have seen these comparables out on the market. To the right, you have a 200-year colonial. Those comparables ran from 37 years old to 250 years old. And then on the 161-year-old colonial at the bottom, those comparables ran from 38 years old to 224 years old. Now, one of the things you'll also notice is I have a couple of little basement photos here. So on the prior slide, when I talked about marketability and loans that can be sold, which would be government loans or Fannie and Freddie loans, one of the things they want to know is whether or not these antique features are going to cause safety and soundness problems. So I'll take a look at the home on the right with the stairs coming down, and you can see the stone foundation. There is absolutely nothing wrong with a stone foundation. They're very strong. You can see there are proper lolly columns in this basement. Again, yes, it's antique. No, it's not a poured concrete foundation, but that doesn't make it wrong, or there's nothing wrong with it. And this is absolutely saleable on the secondary market. In fact, I would argue it adds charm and character to the house. On the picture on the bottom left, slightly different story. We did have to get a copy of the basement inspection from this home inspector to just verify that the stone foundation portion that you can see sort of in the back of that little inset, it looks like smaller rocks, was that sound? Did that have a leaking problem? It was absolutely fine. But again, appraisers are making a visual assessment. They're not necessarily structural experts. So it's very important when we talk about marketability and appraiser comments that we tie those with the appropriate inspector comments to clear any of those hurdles that might pop up. Don't let those hurdles cause you anxiety, I guess. Just know that these are the challenges with antique homes, and we are prepared to deal with them when we take a look at appraisals. Okay, so portfolio loans. This is really the place I see most antiques homes go to. There's more flexibility regarding property condition. So if there is, a foundation that's questionable and the bank is comfortable with it because of an inspection report, it can go in portfolio. We might not be able to sell it if the appraiser has raised the eyebrow, for lack of a better term, of those larger lenders, FHA, VA, and Fannie and Freddie Mac. As a portfolio lender, we have a little more ability to be creative in our analysis to address property issues, as I just mentioned. And then we can blend programs to fit homeowners' needs. And what do I mean by that? Maybe you've been working with David and he says, look, you know what? We're going to need to address shoring up the foundation under the kitchen because the kitchen floor shows a fairly significant slant. It's not a structural problem that hinders the sale of the home, but it is something we want to address. Great. We're going to address that in a rehab or a construction loan, depending on what your needs are. So on a rehabilitation loan, this is really repairs required to bring the home to standards that are safe and livable. Can you get a really solid insurance policy on that home? That's a question you should always be asking. The nice thing about that is we're going to lend you money based on the as completed value. So if the value of the home as it sits is $400,000, but the value after whatever repairs you want to make brings it to $450,000, then we're going to use the $450,000 as our jumping off point to make your loan. That gives you a little extra cash to not bring to the table, but take out of the loan in order to do those repairs. Contracts and estimates are required from a third-party professional, and a final inspection is required by the appraiser or the bank. A quick note on the third-party professional, the reason that's important, it doesn't mean you cannot work on your own home. But God forbid something happened to you and you couldn't do that work, the bank still has to bring that home up to the level of that as completed value that I talked about in bullet number 2. So if we have to hire a professional to do that, then, you know, we've got to have the estimates and the professional kind of on board and ready to go. So that's the reason for that caveat. Construction loans are generally loans where there's going to be major improvements that need to be made. The bank does hold all funds for repairs. Again, we would do an as completed value to calculate the loan amount. General contractor is absolutely required on a construction loan with all the proper insurances. There are usually multiple inspections because this is usually going to be a 6 month to 12 month property conversion. And then at the end, there is a final inspection done by the appraiser because we have to make sure that value we gave it, 6 months or a year ago has been realized through those changes. The biggest thing I would say about do you do construction or rehab, it's going to be dollar amount. 35 to 40,000 is usually the dollar amount, but please keep in mind that you might have an $80,000 roof. I've actually seen this, an $80,000 roof job. I wouldn't put that in a construction loan. I would put that in a rehab loan. So it's not black and white, that $35 to $40,000. But when you think about home repair, that's kind of the break point on construction versus rehabilitation. Okay, so lender flexibility, this is really important. Local community lenders are going to give you the greatest flexibility to be successful. So you want to be sure that your lender offers all 3 types of options, both government guarantees and secondary market, as well as portfolio. The reason it's important is you may have a veteran buying this antique home. Why not take advantage of the lowest rates in the market with the smallest down payment? And they worked hard to have that benefit. There's nothing wrong with using it, and we should encourage that. That said, if the appraisal comes back and the home is not going to qualify, VA simply will not take that loan. You want to make sure your lender can quickly flip it into their portfolio as long as they have one. So if you've started with a lender who does not offer portfolio products, you're going to have to start all over again with a new lender in the event your loan falls through. So I'm very big on that one-stop shopping. Make sure that you use local community lenders who offer all of these products so they can serve all of your needs. Or if you're on the line and you're a realtor or someone within the business, the needs of your client. Really important to be able to move between programs easily. Continuing lender flexibility, I talked about not starting over with a new lender and having the ability to roll over into a portfolio loan. And most importantly, why not partner with a company that's as invested in your community as you are? Preservation is definitely a community effort. And, the reason we were all so interested when I spoke with this group of presenters in this is because we're all really passionate about our communities and giving back. So I want to thank you for having me, giving me this opportunity. And if I can answer any questions at the end, please let me know. And I'm going to turn this over to Mike Bertolone from American National Insurance.
Well, thank you so much, Evelyn. That's terrific and a lot of great information. I want to thank Beverly also for putting this together. And David, your insights are awesome. And one of the things that David mentioned was the importance of working with a professional that knows this. And, so, and Evelyn, of course, brought that up too. One of the things that I want to go over is understanding both the difficulties and also the importance of insuring an older, properly insuring an older home. So there's a lot of difficulty. We're going to go through a bit of that on some slides, but there's also some important things to properly insure. Now you'll see a picture here. This is actually a home I used to own. Thanks to Bob Gawecki, who's now the new owner. He said I could take a picture and use it today. So in there, you'll see the barn behind there, and you'll see the house in front, and it's got a cedar shake roof and some different things going on. And what happens is this goes to an underwriter at an insurance company, and they get a little bit nervous. This isn't a typical thing. They haven't maybe seen this before. Well, they have, but not a lot. Some companies like the cookie cutter regular type of business. Insurance is a lot like that. They like what they're used to, and normally sometimes this stuff is out. If you notice, the barn's attached to the house. So when I try to get a good picture there, but there's a few trees in the way. But when the barn's attached to the house, that means that in a typical homeowner's insurance policy, that's all considered the primary structure. So that makes the need for insurance greater. If you have your barns detached, it's part of the detached structures. Now that can present another problem because you might need to have extra coverage because some barns are actually worth more than the houses or a large amount. And the extension on a typical homeowner's policy is only 10%. Ordinance of law coverage, another thing, you can't really see it here, this house has a stone foundation. Stone foundations create some issues in that if you should have a fire and you should need to rebuild, there may be an ordinance of law that says you got to rebuild with concrete or something, or you may have to do it another way, which may be more expensive. And if you have an endorsement that allows the insurance company to pay more, they can. Now, if we go to the next slide, I'm going to give a couple of problems, okay, that you can have when insuring. One of them is, and it's probably something insurance companies get particularly worried about, is roofs. And why is it a concern? Well, water getting in, water does a tremendous amount of damage on buildings, and that's a big concern for the insurance company. Now, if you have a bad roof and you want to get insurance, you may have a problem, but don't think you totally can't get insurance. You need to make a plan on how you're going to get that roof and when you're going to get it done. So I've had people that they just buy a house, so and they're worried about it, and they go to a professional insurance agent that can put a plan together and talk with an underwriter to say, okay, if they get it done within 60 days or they get it done before winter is usually the big deal. You can insure it. You can also the agent may work with some larger deductibles, or they might work with something called actual cash value rather than replacement cost, which helps the risk become more palatable to the underwriters in that fancy office at the insurance company. Let's, if we go to the next slide, we talk about another thing insurance companies are worried about, and this happens a lot of times with older homes. It's the electrical systems. Electrical systems, you want them up to date. You're going to be living in this home, and the last thing you want to have a safety issue. So pretty much you want to go to a modern electrical system as soon as you can. Knob and tube is something that you're going to want to change. No insurance company's going to want it. Fuses, they're out too. You're going to need to go to circuit breakers in a modern system. But again, look at it as both as an investment in your property, and it's a terrific thing to make that property more valuable in the future, a safety concern, and also, again, make a plan, show the insurance company that you're going to do it in a certain amount of time. Usually, we can get things started so you can close and buy your new home, but you need to have a plan to be able to get that you're going to get that done in a reasonable amount of time. If we go to the next slide, insuring old homes and the types of problems. I brought up the outbuildings. They can become a concern. They may be a liability issue because somebody might get in them. Children, for example, might get in them. They consider that what's called an attractive nuisance. It's kind of exciting to go up and jump out of the hayloft or whatever. So you may have to show that you're going to secure that building until it's repaired and made safe, for the place it is. You also have, to be sure that it's not in compromised foundations, things like that, where the building could collapse. And also, if that, as I said in slide number 1, it's important when you do these repairs, because it can be a sizable investment, that you then cover the building correctly, and not just look at having only the extension on a typical homeowner's insurance policy. So I always say that it's a big investment. When you improve these buildings, make sure you have the right type of coverage. And a lot of times it will take an agent that understands the value of these type of structures. Now, if we go to the next slide, I'm going to be a little bit brief on this. Lead paint can be an issue, primarily with homes built prior to 1979. You have to show that this is done. Now, this can be an issue primarily if you're renting property out. And so if you end up purchasing a home that's a multifamily that's older, or you want to have the extra income from that, you may need to look at remediation. And there are several in the state. If anybody on the call wants some numbers there, I can get them to you. But that's pretty much the big thing there. Sometimes with just to realize if there's going to be exterior construction done, work with contractors that know what they're dealing with when they're dealing with lead. Next slide, please. Okay. Another one of the problems we deal with a lot of older homes is wood stoves. Now, wood stoves are wonderful. I love the heat from them myself, and I enjoy the one I have in my home. And in that home in the first picture, there was a nice Glenwood in the kitchen, which enjoyed many years having that, and a nice fire in there. So it's important to make sure that this condition of the stove is, you don't have cracks in it. It's in good repair. Professional installation is a good thing. Cleaning and inspections is good. Condition of the chimney is really important, as far as like the top is pointed and so forth. And that's a lot of times you're going to get, the home's going to go through inspections at different times. And so that's going to show up. Your agent might see it at first, but you may have another inspector come in at another time and review it also. And so you want to make sure you're one that's All your pipes on the stove are all secured, screwed together, that it fits snugly into the opening of the chimney. And again, everything, it's cleaned usually on an annual basis at least. And then the last slide I have is just general stuff that I'm going to throw in, general things. The liability concern, I run into this a lot. Handrails, some older homes, they didn't have them for whatever reason. Sometimes it's a cosmetic thing where you have to be a little creative in how you do it, so that you don't spoil the look of your house. And so to have some ideas on how you can both make it safe, but both also look as in keeping with tradition as you can. There are solutions, and we find from have to do that sometimes. Large open areas above grounds can be things that happen in older homes. For example, hay lofts. Again, we work with that. Sometimes you need to put rails up. Many times not. Can depend on where you are. If you're out in the country and there aren't a whole bunch of people around, it's sometimes a little easier to get away with things than if you're in a more urban area with an older home that may have a barn attached, and you may have some things there that an insurance company could find as a liability issue. But there are usually ways you can solve that. David brought up the next point earlier in your resale, and it's an important point also in insurance. It's also a point, I think everyone brought it up, even in the lending business, that the way it's called basically looking, pride and ownership. It's a big thing for insurance companies. It's actually something they talk about, and it is making sure that things are clean around your property. And usually you're buying something that might have a bunch of stuff there. Make sure to clean it up away from your building, and so that it looks good, but also it's good for the building. Having plants near it causes moisture issues. That's not good. Mold, mildew, which is can cause problems down the road, and holding paint and all kinds of stuff. So it's a good idea to get things away from the building that way, but also it shows pride and ownership. If there's a lot of stuff in the yard, a lot of insurance companies have a lot of problems with that. Going to the next thing, farm animals, activities, etc. You may have, and I deal with a lot of agricultural insurance, and a lot of times when people start to have pigs or cows or horses, and a lot of the older properties, that's something that comes along with a lot of the flavor of owning something like that, is kind of being maybe a gentleman farmer or enjoying the property that way. Well, you want to work with an insurance company that understands what's going on there and understands fencing and how and stalls and barns you put the animals in, and etc. Also, you might buy a property that you want to try to pay for this habit of having a historic home by maybe doing Airbnb, or you may want to make it a wedding venue. So you want to work with an insurance company that can do that stuff for you too. So that may be, you may need some additional coverages, and a lot of historic homes have the available, and the wedding venue thing. I have a few people doing this, and it's just wonderful, and it's especially with some of the things that have been going on lately with the pandemic. Outdoor weddings are really a big thing, and all big areas like barns have become very popular. So it's kind of a neat thing, and I hope it continues. The other thing is, shrubs and trees. I kind of went through that. Enclosed foundations. Enclosed foundations. Insurance companies don't like things that are open for, squirrels and such to get in there and chew on wires and cause problems like that. And again, I guess trees, we could also talk about trees hanging over roofs and the problems that it have. I think I'm getting near my point. I'm trying to keep it, yes, I'm 18 seconds over. Beverly, I'm going to put it back to you because I want to have some questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Mike. All right, we've put up everyone's contact information here on this slide. I will also include this in the post-event e-communication that I send out probably tomorrow. So don't feel like you have to frantically write this down. This whole session is being recorded as well and will be posted on our website. And I'm surprised there aren't any questions in the chat. So feel free to, don't be shy, put some questions in the chat if you have them. I know I have a lot of questions, so I will start. And my first question is directed at Mike, because
Yes.
I run the barn program at the Preservation Alliance, and I
Yep.
have had multiple calls over the years of people panicking because they said their insurance company called and told them they have to demolish their barn because it's not safe. And I think every single time they have worked it out through good communication with the insurance company or getting a different insurance company. Can you just sort of address that a little bit?
Yes, yeah. So sometimes, I mean, you may be in a situation where the barn looks and could be very, have some serious liability issues, but there's usually something you can do, especially again, going back. If you have a plan to repair that barn in a reasonable amount of time. I mean, if you're going to say I'm going to do it over the next 20 years, that would probably become an issue. But if you're going to do it in a reasonable amount of time, and you can take some precautions that are acceptable to the insurance company, yeah, you can get it done. A lot of people think that insurance agents sell them insurance, and yeah, I guess we do a little bit, but I really think a lot of times my job is to sell the risk to the insurance company. So I have to help, and the client can help me make a presentation to the insurance company that this is a good risk. Then they'll take it on, and you can get that barn rebuilt and do it the right way, and be happy.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Here's another one. Here's one for Evelyn. Anything special about it? HELOC with an antique home?
Good question. No, there's nothing, I wouldn't say there's anything special about it, but again, I would make sure that you're working with a lender who isn't so big that they struggle to understand an antique home. Because again, that marketability and what the comparables are that come through the appraisal are what's going to drive the bus for their acceptability. And I just find that community lenders are a little more understanding and knowledgeable about their local market.
Okay, and sorry, Evelyn, for those who may not know what HELOC stands for?
Oh, HELOC, thank you. Home equity line of credit, which would be either a first or second lien on the home, but it gives you a checkbook. It's like a giant credit card using your house as collateral. Yep. And you can write checks and do your work, and then you can pay it back as you go, and then that money becomes available again as you pay it down, just like a credit card would.
And is that the best route for home improvements on an antique home? Because we're looking at doing some fairly sizable improvements on a antique home we already own.
Good question.
It's the best route if the home, well, there's two things. it's the easiest route if the home is in good enough condition, right? You don't need rehab in order to qualify for the loan or the insurance or anything like that. So if the home's in good shape, a home equity line gives you an awful lot of flexibility. You don't need to have the bank involved in paying contractors and watching the work that's being done. You manage the whole thing at your leisure. And I kind of say for somebody who's doing this as a labor of love, a home equity line is the best way to go because you can do it all at your pace. If the work that you want to do is really required to bring the home up to that level that Michael talked about, from a safety and soundness perspective, then a proper first lien mortgage with that rehab component might be the better option. And all that comes down to your own affordability as well as the condition of the home. Did that
Perfect.
help answer
Thanks.
your question?
That did. Thank you very much, Evelyn.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Great. And okay, any others? I have one for David. David, if you're a first-time old house buyer, what should you be considering looking for? What would you recommend to someone like that who may not know a lot about old houses, but just love them for their charm?
Well, I guess I'd go back to that buyer slide, and that's really when you're getting into the activity, make sure you're talking to a realtor as your buyer agent that understands the product, because you're gonna be going out and looking at houses as a first time buyer of an antique, and you may not know what you're going to get into.
Right.
So you're going to have to rely on them, and then again, as you go through the inspection process, make sure you have an inspector that knows what they're doing. Also, look into the history of the house, number of buyers, what they've done over the years if you can, because most of that stuff's available through town records. So, like anything else, you want to do your due diligence and just work with your realtor to come up with the right solution for you based on what you want to do and what you can afford to do.
Okay, thank you. And I'm looking at the clock. I think I'm going to do my wrap up right now. And then, as I had said, if you want to stay on for a few extra minutes of Q&A, feel free to do that. But at this time, I just want to thank our panelists for this really informative session. I know we just very much touched on the surface here. And I will be including all the panelists' contact information if you have additional questions for them or think of other questions after we close out today. Thoughtful and experienced presenters like David and Evelyn and Mike, and your great questions and involvement make a huge impact on advancing preservation interest and efforts across New Hampshire. We want you to know the Alliance is here to help and encourage you by checking out our website at nhpreservation.org or sending an email to bt@nhpreservation at any time. Our next Expo Zoom session will be on next Tuesday, the 28th, with Scott Hansen presenting Snug as a Bug in a Rug, Insulation and Ventilation for Historic Homes, a very timely topic as the cold weather approaches. Stay tuned to our website calendar at nhpreservation.org for details on this and other Expo on the Road programs. We encourage you to share our Expo website link with other Old House and Barn enthusiasts, and be sure to check out our Expo guide to 50 products and service providers while you're on the Expo page. For those who have been to our Expo in the past, you know how we love to give away door prizes at our event as a token of our appreciation. Today's door prize winner will receive a copy of Virginia McAllister's A Field Guide to American Houses. So at this time, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Maggie Steer, to announce today's lucky winner.
Well, thank you, Beverly. And we are very pleased to give a copy of this book to Amy and Roger Clare. Are they still on the call on the Zoom?
Are they there? They were.
Oh, wow, thank you.
Okay, can we see you?
Oh, wait a minute.
Maybe.
There you are. Oh, good. And do you have an old home?
Yes, we do. And I have a degree in historic preservation.
Oh, wow.
Wonderful. Well, maybe you already have a copy of this book. If you don't, if you probably have used it a lot, it's a great reference. If it's a duplicate for you, maybe you can find someone to give it to. So
Great, thank you.
thank you.
So Amy,
right.
I'll take care of sending that to you, okay?
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you for joining us. All right, so, and as I said, I will be sending a follow-up email with links to some additional resources and also a short survey, which we hope you will fill out to help us with future planning. Thanks again to our panelists for their informative presentation, to our Old House and Barn Expo sponsors who are listed here on the screen, and to all of you who are supporters of our critical work that help advance efforts to save and steward special places across New Hampshire. And please help keep the Preservation Alliance vibrant by making a donation or consider giving a gift membership to one of your Old House friends. We wish you well and look forward to seeing you at future Alliance programs. And again, if you'd like to stay on and have a more formal Q&A session with us, we will stop sharing the screen and you can all unmute yourselves and our panelists will be willing to answer additional questions. So thanks all for joining today. All right, and Evelyn's stopping her shared screen.
Let me figure that out. Sorry.
There we go.
Did
Perfect.
I get it?
There we go.
Yeah. All right, so do we have any
Excellent.
additional
Okay.
questions?
I had a question for David.
Oh, you're frozen.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You said something about swallowing your pride and accepting that the new buyers will make changes to the house. I had an experience of selling a house and then it was demolished. And I know that that's an issue. Are you within your legal rights, or what are your legal rights to like know what the seller plans to, if they plan to demolish it? Because with an antique, you don't want to sell to only have the house lost, but on the other hand, sometimes the land is very valuable, or sometimes people just want a property so much, but they want their own house and it's gone.
Yeah, you're really hitting on a subject that's close to the heart, and legally, no, there's nothing you can do unless there's something in the deed that conveys, that restricts what can happen to that property. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing there as a seller is to do the best job you can to screen the buyers. And you know, if they smell like a rat, look like a rat, then you know they're a rat. You know, you don't want to deal with them. Don't deal with them, because you can turn down any offer that you get.
And I guess that's where a realtor can be particularly helpful too, because if they're honest, they will tell you what
Why the hell did you say that during the presentation? That would have been. I'm just kidding. But no, you're absolutely right, and that's why it's important to have somebody that understands the market and has the passion to preserve, not to destroy.
And what about using a buyer's agent? You touched on that, but I really don't know much about that.
Well, again, and I don't want to sound derogatory towards realtors in general, but most realtors out there do not understand antique homes and all the nuances of ownership, whether you're on the selling side or the buying side. So if you're a buyer, I think the best thing you can do, because you're, as a buyer, you are in the driver's seat, and you can select someone that you want to work with, and just understand that you're going to choose that person, you're going to work with them, and you're going to base that on the fact that they know the product. So being a fool many times, I haven't pushed for a buyer agency. What that means is that you, the buyer, decides you're going to work with me, David, and you're going to work with me until we find a house. And that's a legal relation. an agency relationship. In many cases over the years, I've worked at faith relationships. You know, we talk to each other, we like each other, we think we're going to get along with each other, and there's no loyalty there. So the only thing with a buyer agency, it creates a loyalty bond between both sides. So you don't go into it lightly. You make the selection based on, yeah, that guy knows, that woman knows what the hell they're talking about in buying an old home. So I'm going to roll the dice with that person and stick with them.
Okay.
That
Thank
is your
you.
question?
Yep.
Okay, thank
I
you.
have good
Martha,
enough-
Yes.
sorry, Martha typed in a question here, and I think it's a good one. And maybe this should be directed to Evelyn. She writes, there's a cistern in the cellar of her 200-year-old home. Is it a liability? So I'm assuming that's a big hole in the basement and it's covered with, what
Right.
is it?
It looks.
You know,
kind
from the bank's perspective, I've actually done an antique home up in Conway, and their well was in the middle of the basement, literally. And we just had to make sure that there was adequate railings around it to ensure safety. And we worked with the insurance company to understand what that was. So Mike might have a different thought on that. I do remember working specifically with the insurance agent to make sure we handled it appropriately.
How big a cistern is this? Is it 6 feet across?
I really don't know because it has a lid on it that's sort of like a manhole cover with a much smaller hole in it. And I don't know what the real cistern itself looks like down inside. I mean, it might be 6 feet deep, but I don't really know how wide it is.
Yeah, or deep, wide, deep, whatever. You don't know. Yeah. That's
My brother
interesting.
and I survived.
So,
Yes. Sorry.
how is it refilled? Does it come from the roof, or where's the water come from, or is it just
Well,
groundwater? Or
unfortunately, it comes from leaks in the cellar. The original dirt floor was cemented up at some point, and yet there are spots where water just comes up through it when there's a very heavy rain, and you hear the sound of it trickling down into the cistern when there's a lot of water in the cellar.
yeah.
But
I mean, yeah, having it covered well and so forth. That's the important thing. If it becomes, it's only going to probably become an issue if you put the property up for sale or something like that. But again, it could be. There's always a way to solve that. It sounds like something that could be made secure pretty easily.
yes, I mean, this is a home that I grew up in, and my brother and I survived childhood playing in the cellar, and we never got into trouble with the cistern. But
Yeah.
I don't know about the next family. So,
Geez, you
And
might be
then-
able to turn that into a hot tub or something.
I have a related question relating to sump pumps. I mean, a lot of old house basements have sump pumps. Does that tend to be a red flag for the building inspector or getting a mortgage or inspection or insurance or anything? Or is that a good thing?
Okay, so one thing is available on a lot of insurance policies is sewer and sump coverage. If you have a sump pump, not a bad idea to have that, so that if something happens and it doesn't work properly, you have some coverage. Otherwise, any type of flood damage, water from the inside coming in is not covered. So that's it's a good thing to look at that as a coverage option should you have that. So I would look at that. Is it a good thing? Yeah, it is. I mean, of course, it's nice if you can have your water drained to daylight. If there's a way to do that, that's always a little better because you don't have to worry about something mechanical working.
Yeah.
So.
But qualifying for a mortgage, Evelyn, I meant, is it a good thing or a bad thing?
You know, as I mentioned earlier, the appraiser is kind of there are eyes and ears on the ground. So if the appraiser makes note that there are watermarks on the walls in the basement, the next question is going to be, does the basement flood regularly? Is there a sump pump? You know, what actions have been taken to mitigate that continuance of possible damage to the foundation from water? And we all know water is extremely destructive when it wants to be. So for us, we like seeing the sump pump because it
Okay.
tells us that if there is a watermark, that someone has addressed it. We're probably going to ask for an inspector's report on that item. And as I mentioned earlier, I really just want to know about addressing the water in the basement issue versus the whole report. So just share with me the inspector's feedback on when that watermark came to be, when was the sump pump put in, has been working since then, and that kind of clears up that problem from a marketability perspective.
Okay.
Beverly,
Yes.
just a add on to Evelyn. I feel that one of the things that's important to mention to people that are looking at their own home is that it's pretty close to being impossible to keep water out of a basement with a stone foundation. So let's face the reality of it. So the point that she makes is that if they have gone to the measures of putting a sump in or doing anything they can to mitigate the amount of moisture is a good thing. So you're minimizing what you could possibly have as far as damage.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, most old house basements I go in do have sump pumps.
Oh yeah,
Then it's
Definitely.
a good thing.
and they do have moisture.
Right. Absolutely. Okay.
Hey Beverly, there was somebody that came on or something on chat. I don't know if she's still online or not, but it was Andrea from upstate New York.
Oh, right. I saw that she had asked about whether this will be posted, and I did say it will be posted on our website, this recording. So she will be able to view it from our website. And I'll put the link in the email that I send out tomorrow.
Thank you very much. I
All
appreciate it.
right. Thank everybody. Thank you all. Thank the panelists, Evelyn and David and Mike. That was really great. Great information.
Thank you, Beverly, for hosting us. This was a wonderful opportunity.
Thank you. And everybody have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.